So today I have a special guest on our show, my friend Robert, and he has dedicated a lot of his life to preaching about spirituality, helping other men get in tune with their own spirituality, and helping others on their journey. And I think Robert is the perfect first guest for me to have on my podcast. We met like probably about, what was it, like last year?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we had the best conversations, and Robert always was really into just, enlightenment and figuring out how to navigate today's society. And when I told him about this podcast, he was open. So thank you so much for joining me today. Do you want to kind of introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm flattered to be
Of course, the first
guest. No pressure at all, right?
Yeah, no pressure.
So by introduction, my name is Robert Joseph, and born and raised not far from here, actually, over the Outer Bridge in Staten Island, New York. And I, by day, work in tech. So I work in cybersecurity. By night, I run men's groups, what I would call emotional body work, body release work. And overall, I'm just very curious in spirituality. That's always been something very important to me, is my divinity and learning to know God within this lifetime. So I spend a lot of time in nature, upstate, in contemplation and meditation and in gratitude.
How long ago did you start getting into your journey?
That's a really good question. It depends on the timeline on I think it started when I was born, right? Like it felt like it was seated in me, like it's seated in all of us, I really believe.
Right.
But I always had this keen awareness. I grew up Catholic.
Okay.
Catholic, all boys, high school. And I rebelled a lot against like classic theology.
Right. You always wanted to find your own path.
I always wanted to find my own path. I always had questions. So it kind of set me on a quest. So I would say it started like pre-adolescence, where I really started getting real curious.
Okay. Now, when you were in pre-adolescence, did you have friends that were kind of seeking the same thing, or did you feel kind of like you were on your own?
I always felt on my own.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people do feel like that. Like I feel like when I first started, questioning and all of that, you feel like you can't really talk to a lot of people about it because they start thinking that you're just weird and an outcast. So nobody's really searching for spirituality usually in like their earlier years.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like it definitely takes time, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at that age, I was a kid. I was curious at best, but I didn't have the faculties to really connect with God.
Right.
Right. So I think usually later in life, people start waking up.
Mm-hmm.
For Carl Jung, the classic therapist, he said, for men, life starts at 40.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's really when, like, some people call it a midlife crisis, but I think that's the wrong term. I think it's just you start really saying, okay, my life is potentially half over.
Right.
Where have I been? Where am I going?
Right.
What is this all about?
Yeah. Isn't it crazy that that's like one day to the other? You're like, wait, it's not like a gradual thing that you realize that your life is slowly progressing. It's like one day to like another, it just hits you at one moment. And you're like, wait, my life is like halfway over. Yeah. Like, you think you're like invincible, you're going to live forever. And then I feel like when you realize you're not, you start really questioning our purpose and why we're here.
I agree.
Yeah. Love that you do this work with men, because I feel like a lot of times men have a problem just opening up and being vulnerable and admitting that they're seeking something. I feel like us women, we have a better support system when it comes to that we can go to our friends, and it's not looked at as vulnerable. But with the men, for some reason, it's like you can't have those deep conversations. Nobody's really talking about those subjects,
right?
And it affects every day. It affects their relationships with women, their relationships with themselves. So that's great that you do this work, and I'm sure you probably get, a lot of interesting stories. And
oh yeah, absolutely. It's critically important work for men to do, because at the end of the day, right, when I think about masculinity, it's something that it's not really our birthright.
Mm-hmm.
Our birthright is our gender, being a boy and becoming a man physically. But really, our fathers, generally speaking, are going to be the personification of what masculinity is.
Right.
And if our fathers let us down in some capacity, physically absent, emotionally absent, abusive, addicted,
right,
then our role model of what that looks like is going to fail us.
Right.
And unfortunately, that happens a lot in life,
I
right?
was just gonna say, when you think about it, there's more absentee fathers than ever, I feel like, and it's
There
so.
are, and it's not just physically absent. Emotionally
Mhm.
absent is as dangerous,
Right.
right? So if that's the case, and masculinity by definition needs to be cultivated, right? Because it
Hmm.
kind of has to be earned
Yeah.
and learned.
Right.
Then men need to go find fatherhood through brotherhood. That's what men's group are.
Right. Kind of like relearning and everything that from childhood. A lot of men
Yeah,
are in such defense mode, I feel
right.
like, since kids, and they have no idea how to turn, like, they see masculinity as such a tough thing that I feel like they don't know how to use the vulnerability side of masculinity to.
Yeah, I mean, masculinity is not something that people really talk about, but like, because no one cares, right? It's like, be
Hmm.
a man, suck it up. But,
Right.
in some ways, it could be a burden because we are expected to provide and protect.
Right.
What does that mean? That means we have to build ourselves to be able to provide and protect.
Right.
So there is a process of, like I said, cultivation. We have to build ourselves up and prepare for the unknown.
Hmm.
I've worked hard my whole life, and I never knew why until recently. I don't have a family. But since my early 20s, I've been working for that point where if I do have a family, they don't have to worry. Everything's taken care of.
Right.
So if you have a family, great. Then you're going to have the pressure of being able to sustain it. If you don't, you're probably preparing for something
Right.
because it's not about us. So I'll give you a quick story. I have a friend in the men's work, and he's got a different energy than me. He's very like kind of, I would say, even calmer in some ways.
Hmm.
So I don't like when people say masculinity is toxic. I think that's a dangerous narrative.
Right.
I believe masculinity, like femininity, can be unhealthy.
Hmm.
Of course, right? We're
Right.
humans.
Right.
But he was he was at a hotel and there was women in the pool, and one of them said, "Men ain't shit," right?
Hmm.
She was like, "We don't need men." And my friend very calmly says, "That might be true, but if there was an emergency that happened in this pool area, if someone just came and started shooting,
Hmm.
if there was a fire, men would instinctively protect you.
Right.
It's not a law.
Right.
It's not in the Constitution.
Right.
You're not going to jail if you run out of the building.
Hmm.
But there's something within us that does care about women, does care about children, does care about those who are weak.
Hmm.
That's biological. So in a sense, it's like we are constantly thinking about how can we provide for others? How can we build ourselves up so that we have this nest egg for the people that we love?
Right. It's funny because I was like, oh, I have my notes, and I actually have exactly what you just said. I feel like we don't even need notes because I feel like I literally wrote down exactly what you said, about wanting to brush on just the modern term of toxic masculinity, because I just feel like it's toxic to even think that masculinity could be toxic. I feel like we need more masculinity, if anything, in today's society. And there was a story I saw, something about a woman that she was drowning, and I don't know if you heard of it. And this man stepped in and saved her, and I guess she pressed charges, or she was offended that he had stepped in against her will, or so. It was something like, it was just like, I feel like these days, then that comes in with like the modern age feminist movement,
Right.
too. And I feel like that's a toxic movement, in my opinion, because I feel like we both have our like perfect like yin yang when it's just coexisting, masculinity and femininity. And now it just seems like everybody's just trying to be like the opposite, like they're trying to be equal, to have a partner be 50-50 and everything be just, we are equals, and then women are trying to be like men, and then we're just like butting heads instead of just coexisting and letting things take its natural flow.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I agree that I hate when people use the term toxic masculinity. I think we need all the masculinity we can get, and that it's kind of an instinct for a man to provide, to protect, especially in circumstances where they can see somebody in danger. And nowadays, it's like I feel like a lot of women are hypocritical when they say that they're against toxic masculinity. It's like, all right, until you need it, until you are in a circumstance
Yeah.
where your life is being threatened, you're gonna first look at the man. You're not looking at your friend. You're looking
Sure.
at the one man in the room that's gonna, and hope they're gonna protect you.
Sure.
Like, I'm not gonna be banking on one of my friends to save me if I'm in one of these like detrimental situations. I'm going to be hoping that someone's masculinity kicks in
Right.
at that time.
Right.
But I think that's also, I think it's just being pushed, that whole agenda that men shouldn't be masculine and women need to be more masculine and men need to be more feminine. I feel like it's kind of like Hollywood is actually pushing that too. Like it's pushing a lot of men to be feminine.
Be very dangerous. I think it's just a misunderstanding, right? Because when you tell men that they need to awaken their feminine, 95% of guys are going to walk away.
Right.
5% will probably understand the point and the intention of it because they're more aware.
Yeah.
But the word itself, it's not really the right word, right? Yes, we have the masculine and feminine within us, but I think when we get so obsessed with those words, it loses context. We are, as a human being, we are both rational and we're emotional. Right. We have to be able to use both of those faculties in unison, balanced, harmonious way. If one of those are overextended or one of those are underused, we're going to be out of balance. You do have men that are overly rational, and you have men that are overly vulnerable. Neither of those are really healthy. Right. Most guys are overly rational. So what they're trying to say with awaken the feminine is you got to learn to be more instinctual, intuitive.
Right.
You have to be able to be more vulnerable. You have to be in touch with your emotions. That's correct.
Compassionate.
Yeah, compassionate. All these things, nurturing, right? A man needs to master his being. That's what they're trying to say, but the verbiage can be very misleading.
Right.
With feminism.
Yeah.
Feminism by nature is a movement that says women should be equal to men in different capacities. Absolutely. My view from what I see in my industry, I work in tech.
Yeah.
We have done that masterfully.
Right.
I don't see any imbalance in my world. Okay. But the extreme of it is you don't need men. It's a lie.
And I think that's like modern day feminism, because before it was just like we're fighting to have, equal jobs and equal pay, and which, yes, we should. I think we, like you said, I think we overcame that already. And now it just turned into feminism. Now is just something completely different, I feel like, than it was like 50 years ago, the definition of feminism. It seems like now feminism is literally about hating men.
It can be.
Yeah.
It can be on the extreme sense. But, again, it's a little disrespectful. Like me saying we don't need women. Those words would never leave my mouth.
Right.
I honor love because all birth comes through women.
Right.
So we have to honor our men because, yes, of course, there are a small minority of men that can cause damage to families, to industries, to politics. Most men are just going to save children from earthquakes that are buried in rubble.
Right.
Who's going down into the coal mines? Who's cleaning out these sewers in New York City?
Yeah.
Who's picking up your garbage on the street?
Yeah,
who's running into fires, rescuing families and animals? So I agree. This division between gender is the most dangerous division that we could have.
Yeah.
Because if men and women aren't getting along, if men and women aren't coming together to create, that's God's agenda.
Right.
Is continuation.
Yep.
That's why he gives us this sex drive.
Right.
Right? We're becoming at odds with each other, and it's causing a lot of confusion.
Yeah, and it's like you can even see it when there's somebody that they are lacking masculine energy in their life, and a lot of times, sadly, there's a lot of fathers that are not present, and you can tell when a woman or a man is lacking that masculinity in their life and just that masculine role. Not always, because some people have done like their healing and all of that, but a lot of times you could tell when the masculine role is missing. So for us to say that we don't need men is crazy. Like we need men just as much as we need women, but for different reasons.
Right, but to your point, now here's a little girl that grew up without a father, or a father that didn't give her what she wanted. Of course, she's going to grow up to be a woman that's like, men ain't shit.
Right.
Her father wasn't shit, right? When you see that, we have to have compassion to say that's coming from a personal wound.
Right, it's of her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And most of the time, people that, are just like have that demeanor, it is from a place of hurt. So what would you recommend somebody to do that's lacking masculinity in their life? As a man or as a woman or as both? Well, both, yeah.
Well, I think for a man, it's pretty simple. Like you need to find the brotherhood, because most, like indigenous tribes, they have a rite of passage for boys to become men. In this country, we don't have that.
Right.
So men's work is not known by a lot of men. That could be a great indoctrination into reclaiming your masculinity. to be around healthy men.
Right.
A lot of men they use women as a way of socialization. Dating is their life.
Yeah.
Now there are these princes that are just constantly around women. They're not around men. And when they're around real men, they're nervous. So they need to get comfortable with real masculine energy, healthy masculine energy. For a woman, I think it's a little bit different. I think a woman needs to go inwardly and say, why do I have this view of men? Is it because of my own experience? Yes. Right? Because if your father was missing, then you probably don't know what healthy masculinity looks like. And therefore you dated men that don't represent healthy masculinity.
Right.
You're in this karmic loop. All men are garbage.
But you're just kind of projecting
which is not true.
Known.
It's your world.
Right.
It's not the world. So you need to go and look at that pattern in your life and say, how do I escape this? Because it is karmic and it does go back to the father wound, so that I can recalibrate and actually start attracting healthy men in my life. Sometimes it'd be good for them to get an example of that. Maybe she has a friend who has this amazing husband. Yeah. Maybe there's an uncle that she hasn't talked to in a while that was there when she was a child, but you got to witness it first to believe it.
Right. And I think also it doesn't necessarily have to mean trauma from a father or, a father being absent. Like for me personally, I grew up with a great father, and he was always a provider. He was always, just a great example of a husband. So, and I have other friends that have grown up with good fathers, but for some reason with dating, they might have, chose the wrong partners. And it seems like kind of a test that keeps testing. So it's like we will say like, oh my God, all these men out here suck. Like there's no good men in the dating pool. But then you'll see like that small percentage of people that are happy. And I'm like, okay, this gives you some hope. I feel like it doesn't even have to be a father. It could be also just in general having bad experiences dating. And then you just get into that mentality of like all men are the same. And, but like I said, you do see those few examples that give you hope, and you're like, okay, this, there is good men out there, just like there's good and bad women. Maybe I am a little biased. I think there's more good women, but
I can tell you some stories, but that's
I know. I mean, there is, like I said, even the men that a lot of times the men that we see is like, they're putting us through a lot of trauma. It's them not being healed and them not finding the masculine example for them. That a lot of fathers are not there today, and like you said, they could be physically there, but they haven't really taught them how to be a masculine man without it being toxic. It's almost like sometimes men feel like resentment towards having to be masculine. Like that's another thing too.
Yeah.
A lot of men are like, okay, well, I'm being the masculine man, or I'm providing, or I'm the provider, I'm the protector, so that means I can go cheat. Or that means I can go do something else. It's like they're angry that they have to do that role in a weird way. And I mean, I don't know if it's because maybe their partner's not, in their feminine enough, but that's another thing. It's just really rare to find men that are healed to the point that they actually are really enjoying being in their masculine. And I think that's where men should, strive to get is it's actually feeling like being in their masculine is fulfilling for them.
Yeah. That's a really good point, because as I said earlier, it can feel like a burden, especially when you're building, right? But you do get to a point where some men enjoy it.
Right.
They enjoy this idea of providing and protecting and building businesses and really having a real mission and purpose. I think that's the missing ingredient for a lot of these men that you're describing.
Yeah.
Is if you're just working purely for money, or purely because you have to provide for your family, of course you're going to get tired and exhausted, especially if your family's not appreciating it the way you expect them to appreciate it. If you actually, and I think this is the missing ingredient for a lot of relationships, is the man has a mission. If the man has a mission, the woman will always appreciate him and always respect him. If she sees that he doesn't, and he works 50 hours a week and then just watches Netflix all weekend, drinks beer. Yeah. And if he's providing adequately, it's going to be like, you're so much, I see your potential. You don't see it. You're lazy and you're bitter and you're angry. And yeah, you put food on the table, but I don't feel you.
Right. Like you're not purpose driven.
You're not purpose driven. Yeah. This is why I think, women and men, we all need to go inwardly and form a relationship with God. Because what happens is then it becomes less about our personal will and more about God's will. And if we align with God's will, then our life becomes about service. And when our life is about service, everybody around us is in admiration and respect and reverence for who we are as a person. And then, moreover, they join in service.
Mm-hmm.
If I had children and they see me, let's say, volunteering at a soup kitchen every weekend,
Right.
it's contagious. They're going to want to join me at that soup kitchen.
Right.
So who do they become? Watching me embody this level of consciousness.
That's how you pass down the right habits for the next generation or for your kids. And
Yeah.
yep. And that's interesting too, because I feel like you said, it's, about kind of pursuing the mission of what God wants you to do, not just what you want to do selfishly. And I feel like people now more about want what they to be accepted for anything. Like there's no rules anymore. Like there's no foundational like morals in society. Like there's like, all right, everything should be accepted. And that's kind of where we're going now. Like, and instead of saying that, all right, what's right is sometimes not what I want to do. Like sometimes the right thing is what I don't want to do. And we just have to accept that. And I feel like a lot of people know in their conscience, like what's right or wrong. They just think that, God should accept them, like whatever, accept any behaviors that we do. And it's like having like a parent, instead of saying like, oh no, this is the right thing to do and this is the wrong thing to do. It's like, it's just kind of like a free for all.
It's a free for all. Yeah. And the problem with that is we need a compass as humans.
Yeah.
We need something to follow. Otherwise we'll be misguided. Imagine like my parents are like, you're 18, you could move out, go do whatever you want. And I'm like, cool, the world is my oyster. I could get hurt.
Right.
And that's the whole point of religion, is they try to take this mysticism and put it into some text, some structure, right? Now, I'd argue that it could become overly structured, for sure.
Right.
And if we follow it to a T, then we could become Puritans. I think that's necessarily the path either. I do think that we need something or someone to follow, right?
Right.
And I think this is why, like, Catholicism, Christianity is so prevalent in the world. It's still the number one religion in the world.
Yeah.
And I think my opinion is it's partly because of the relatability of it. There's a man, Jesus Christ, that actually did it. He walked perfectly. Okay, I'm never going to be Jesus Christ, but I have a perfect example. It's very simple to see, because if God didn't send man, then how would we really even fathom God? We'd start going, what we do, right? Source, energy, right? We'd start trying to figure it out. But God's like, I'm going to send you man so that there's relatability.
Right.
I'm going to send a human. And that human is going to embody godliness. And that human is going to show you your potential. So I think that we need that, because our conscience, I agree with you, we have a conscience for a reason, but at the same time, how many people's conscience fail them?
Right.
How many people think they're doing the right thing and they're actually hurting everybody that comes into their sphere? So their moral code is flawed.
Right. There's no like higher than them code that they're following.
Exactly.
They're just going by their own beliefs. So that's the good thing about it's like having law or something, it's like having government or something. I mean, when it's like ran correctly, but it's just by like having rules in general. I feel we all need rules, like, of what to follow. And like you said, there is a fine line. And, I'm still like, I just started going back to church, and I always believe like you just need to have your own personal relationship with God. You don't technically need a church, but it's nice to have a sense of community, whatever works for you, So I've never been super religious, but I've always had like that spirituality side of me where I'm just like seeking my own relationship. I do acknowledge that it's not, there is sometimes things that I might need to follow that I don't want to follow, that I myself, that's not my natural instinct to do, but I feel like it's just, you need that right from wrong. And you need those teachings just to tell you, like, to get you on track. Cause it's so easy now to like, get off track. Like it almost seems like the wrong is the right, like, cause it's so common. So it's good to have just something that keeps you centered.
I agree. And it also gives you peace, right? It's like, for example, the Bible, you could argue whether we should take it literally or not. But I don't know if that's always the right question. Like, we need to reframe the questions. I think a better question is, how do you feel when you open the book?
Right.
How do you feel when you have a cup of coffee and you open up the book and you read it? Does it give you peace? Right? Does it give you hope? Does it give you faith? Does it make you walk differently throughout the day? That's what's really important. That's how
Yeah.
you know something's sacred,
Right.
right? How do you feel if, you go out and you get drunk
Mhm.
and you take some guy or girl home that's a stranger
Mhm.
and the experience wasn't what you thought it would be, and that person kicks you out of the house,
Mhm.
doesn't get you a taxi, and you got to find your way home at 3 in the morning.
Right.
Saying it's right or wrong.
Right.
That's not for me to decide.
Right.
But the feeling that you get after it
Mhm.
is the truth.
Right.
The body will tell you the truth.
Mhm.
This is why I think, to your point, having a personal relationship with God is so important.
Yeah.
Because it is through our heart that we know God.
Right. You don't just want to read scripture because you're supposed to and it's routine.
Right.
You want something that resonates with you, no matter what it is, no matter what the way to get closer to God is. Like I said, if not everybody has to go to church, but some people do, and some people feel it more when they go. So I feel like whatever your personal path is, not everybody's the same. So
Right.
we gotta just kind of lock in with what our personal path is and how to just like tap into that and stay disciplined and consistent. Like I know for me, staying consistent is my like hardest thing. Like I feel like almost as if something always tries to hold me back. Like as much as I try to be consistent, it'll be like 10 steps back to not be consistent or disciplined. And I think it's just important when you find the right path to just keep on that track.
Yeah, whatever that is for you, right? I just literally came from the park, and I'm trying to build this community in Brooklyn or the area, not just Brooklyn. And a friend of mine is like, I want to get this woman involved. I want you to meet her. I said, okay. So we meet at the park, and she's like, tell me what you're thinking. And I'm like, I give her my vision, right? Just, I want to build a community, right? She asked me, why are you doing this? I said, I want to build a community, and I don't like to see people suffer. And I think in this city, in this area, people are lacking that spiritual gathering.
Right.
I give her this, what I thought was like a beautiful vision. And she's like, I'm not interested.
Who was she? Was she just somebody that...
She was a woman that's very much in the church.
Okay.
And she helps children. She does beautiful work. And I think I don't want to say triggered her, because it was a peaceful conversation, but it was like, I said, everybody's welcome, no matter their path, right? And
did she want it to just be like strictly church?
Yes, so she is more of a traditional Christian.
Yeah.
I think that whole like inclusivity thing, wasn't for her. It's almost like, no, they have to qualify first.
Yeah, and see, that's why I always, like I was saying, you have to have your personal relationship with God, because we're all human, and you don't know. I mean, a lot of these, like, religion has been the cause of so much war, so much, so much. We can only really trust in God. Like, we can't trust in humans 100%, even though people might be the messengers. But nowadays, it's so hard to find just that community that's genuine. So I feel like when you see someone that's just not wanting to be inclusive or not wanting to just spread light, and just no matter what someone else's background might be, maybe eventually she could have saved these people that were going through a hard time. But to just completely cancel it out just because that person is not in your exact religious, place in life, like for me, that's the thing that turns me off about organized religion.
Well, the hypocrisy is staring her right in the face, right?
Right.
It's like, it's very anti-Christian to say you're not allowed at the table.
Right.
Unless you believe what I believe.
Right. It's almost like I'm too good for you.
Yeah. Like, it's anti-religion. It's anti-God.
Right.
It creates division. And, Jesus Christ didn't come here to start a religion.
Yeah.
He transcended religion.
Right.
So I think that's where we get confused, is like, we are the embodiment of God, which is love and service. So if you're bringing people together under one theme, which is God and love, who cares?
Right.
Jesus licked the lepers. Jesus sat with the prostitutes, right? So this is where I get caught up with, we have to walk the walk. And if you're a true Christian, then you are emulating Christ, and Christ would not exclude anybody from the table.
Right.
Right? So I just find that interesting. And to your point, there's different stairways to the top of the roof.
Yeah.
And we could all, whether it's Buddhism or Taoism, they all have, honestly, a lot of overlapping beliefs.
Yeah.
So it's all the same thing.
It's all belief in a higher power that created us and serving good. I mean, Like that's like we were talking before we were on air about how I just realized I had a bunch of Buddhist statues everywhere, and then I was just like, I'm not Buddhist one day, and I just kind of like threw them away. But I mean, no matter what it is, I don't feel like I was ever like intentionally like serving something negative. Like it was always just serving a higher power, and maybe it had a different name at the time. Like, and I mean, I always believed in God, and I would always call it God, but sometimes it's, oh, I'm serving God through Christ, or I'm serving, God through just like the universe. A lot of people say they call it the universe or the law of attraction, or good karma. And, I mean, all of these things are just kind of guidelines to make us better people. Mm-hmm. So I just hate when it's like religion is just so against each other and causes just so much like hate and so much war.
Well, look what's happening. We're on the brink of World War III.
Oh, yeah.
Mostly because geopolitics and religion. Let's be honest.
And religion has been, I feel like, the cause of most wars. So, and it's so sad because I tend to just look at humans and their heart and try to see, where they're coming from. It doesn't matter what religion you are. I've met people of different religions, different backgrounds. For me, it's all about the consciousness and the intention that people have. So it's really sad when people are just like, you're not exactly my religion. Like you can't, I can't be with, like, it just spreads hate when that's the last thing that we need right now is hate. Yeah. I feel like we just need people to come together. I mean, and then it could be somebody that technically identifies as your exact same religion, and they could be the worst person ever. So I feel like it's just all about having genuine intentions and just purity, like just having a pure soul and a pure conscience,
That's it.
And it's hard to, whatever path it takes you, that's great. But we don't all have to have the same path, but we should all respect each other no matter of our personal, relationship with God or with the universe or whatever, I just hate the divide that we're in right now.
Yeah, it's people need love. They don't need more preachers. They don't need more extreme religious leaders.
Right.
We don't need some political savior. There's no cavalry coming.
Right.
What we need is more love. And, even as parents see their children, I speak to it as a brother to a sister that had a lot of dysfunction growing up. But I look back now and my parents did the best they could with her, but they thought she needed help. Mm. So what happens when you think someone needs help without them admitting it is you drag them around from doctor to therapist, and they poke her and they question her and they put her on the machine.
Right.
But really, love is the only medicine in this world. Mm-hmm. You can take all the pills you want. You're treating the symptoms. You're not getting to the root. If everybody was giving each other more love and space and vulnerable settings like this to talk about real life,
right,
we would slowly begin to raise our consciousness. But we're living in a world now where people haven't even healed.
Yeah. Or they haven't even started to even think about healing. Like that's just not even in their realm of thought. I feel like it's all about our inner child, just going back to that and like to the purest form of ourselves and kind of unraveling everything else that's happened after that. And a lot of people, they'll never get to that in their life. And that's so sad that a lot of people are never going to be their most authentic, purest self because there's just so much resentment, so much hurt. And no one really wants to go through those layers of unraveling all of that because it's hurtful, it's messy. It's not easy, the healing process. So even to begin it is probably the toughest time of the healing process.
It's really hard. Mm-hmm. You have to go into the belly of the whale. Right. You have to descend into your own personal hell. Yeah. You have to go into the darkness to see the light. And most people will give up at that stage.
Yeah. They'll say, this is too difficult. This is too hard.
It is difficult, but anything worth doing in life is difficult.
Yeah.
There's a payoff, right? And that, I think, everyone, from what I see, a lot of people think that you just come in and you know God. Mm-hmm. But in my experience, you have to earn it because it's a frequency.
Right.
And if it's a noise to signal ratio, and if there's too much noise coming in, then you're not going to get the signal. Mm-hmm. So you have to manage the noise, manage the chaos, and then edify that signal so that you could begin to feel these things. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. You get on that road of Christ consciousness or enlightenment or whatever you want to call it. You start experiencing things in your body, whether that's spontaneous tears, whether that's just huge releases of emotion, whether there's, bouts of joy and bliss. And then you start going, oh yeah, this is real.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not what I thought it was. It's not some bearded guy in the sky.
Yeah.
There's this something in me that I feel, and it's in my heart.
Like an internal light.
An internal light that begins to shine. But we got to get the debris off
out
of
the
it
way
first. We got to brush it off, and it takes time.
Yeah.
And it could be a lifelong journey. It could be a multiple lifelong journey.
Mm-hmm.
But I really believe, this is my personal opinion, we are here to reach our potential, godly potential.
Yeah.
Because if we have people in political office, if we have people running these industries that are godly, then the world will start what I believe to be correcting.
Right.
In the right way.
Slowly shifting back to some normality. Well, some sense of rightness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're at the early stages of an awakening, is from what I see.
I think I'm like, we're either at the early stages of we're at a crossroads. Like we're either at an early stage of an awakening or the beginning of the end times. So we don't know which direction.
Speak about that. What does that mean, the end times?
The beginning of the end times. I just feel like the way that society is going now, like we just can't continue this way. Even down to just, I feel like there's just so much negative and demonic, I guess you can say, forces, Hollywood, politics, everything, that society can't sustain itself for much longer because they're pushing men to be more feminine, women to be more masculine. Like the roles are just completely going the opposite of the natural order. So I feel like all of that, and also when we get to the point where there's no right and wrong, I feel like we're either at a brink of people are going to wake up, or it's the beginning of the end because we need a reset. I feel like in order for us to get back to how things are supposed to be, we're going to need to completely reset if everybody else is so far gone.
Yeah, there's esoteric beliefs that like we are where we're supposed to be on a grander scale, which may or may not be true. It depends on what you believe. But yeah, we need the resistance.
Yeah.
We need the resistance in order to evolve. We need the dark to be able to identify the light. So I do think that we're on this we're on this precipice of something bigger. And it might be where you have this small set of people that break off from technology.
Right.
Right? Like during the pandemic, a lot of people bought land, including myself.
Oh, okay.
We didn't even know why we were buying land.
Yeah.
Consciously, but subconsciously we did.
You knew it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, there's this sort of this preparation of like, hey, the world has always been a little bit mad, or there's a darkness to the world because we live in a 3D polarity.
Right.
But now it's being exposed because of the internet. We have this whole network of information, and if you don't know about it, that means you're not asking the right questions to the AI,
right?
Or you're not asking the right questions to YouTube, because you could go down some rabbit holes.
Oh yeah.
And you can find out some uncomfortable truths.
Yeah.
Not even conspiracies, like uncomfortable truths of how societies used to exist in the shadows,
right?
And how societies exist today. For example, child trafficking is the second biggest crime, billions and billions of dollars, right? The only crime, are we off?
Why did it cut us off?
See, that's the demonic
forces. Oh wow, yeah,
trying to prevent us from speaking the truth. As soon as we started
talking about child trafficking, they're listening.
You see?
They tried to cut us off.
I believe that, by the way.
We're on to things.
I believe it. Yeah. So only drug trafficking is bigger than human trafficking.
And I heard that it bypassed the drug market in the past 3 years.
It's possible.
Yeah.
And think about it. Does anybody know where those children go? Can anybody answer that question? I can't answer the question. But when you look around at these elitists, they're invisible and they're in the shadows, and they always been from the Freemason days. And they do that by design, and they have underground communities and kingdoms, and they indoctrinate these children, and they do black magic on them. That's not a conspiracy. I mean, you could look that up.
Right.
That industry of human trafficking is over $30 billion. The children are going somewhere, and they're not in your backyard, and they're not in plain sight. So what people call conspiracies, a lot of times are uncomfortable truths that we don't want to admit.
It's just easier to brush something off as a conspiracy.
Yes. Yeah. And now they're starting to get exposed because people are starting to learn about it because the information is there. People that got out are talking about it. Okay, so now what do you do with that information? Well, your best bet is to mobilize and form new systems and create new communities and have places to go.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I told you 5 years ago there's going to be this global virus,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to affect every single person in the world, 7 billion people, and those people aren't going to be able to leave the house. And if they do leave the house, they could contaminate you, and you could
Mm-hmm.
get sick, and your family could die. You'd be like, "You're a lunatic," right? You wouldn't believe me. Well, so those kind of things have proven to happen, and they certainly could happen again.
Uh-huh.
We don't have to live in fear,
Right.
but we have to be smart about where we live, how we live, who we choose to live with.
Right. And
If,
back to just how you said, like you purchase land, and me and a couple of my friends are always talking about how we feel like that's going to be the next step is just building a homestead with like-minded people. And that's kind of why I wanted to get into just building this podcast too, is because we don't know if we are going to need a community. I mean, we all need community, but now more than ever, we need like-minded people. Like, yeah, I feel like just about having kids, I like I'm going to need a sense of like-minded people in a community, because nowadays everything they're trying to indoctrinate kids with is insanity. And that's why I think a lot of people are realizing, especially after COVID, that something can happen in our lifetime, and it has happened. And I feel like we've just been living through all these random events that we're kind of numb to it. But I feel like nothing's more important than having like-minded people around you, because for me, that's what keeps me sane. Like I would have thought I was nuts a long time ago if nobody around me had similar views, and I don't have these like conversations with a few people in my life. I would just be like, what am I just going completely psychotic?
yeah,
Because when there's and that's why I wanted to start the podcast, because I'm like, there's so many people that probably think they're nuts, that
yeah,
probably are like, they don't have anybody to talk to, they don't have a community, everybody around them is completely asleep to what's going on, and they're probably like, why do I feel this heightened sense of something around me is happening, or it's just, I mean, I think community is so important.
it is. And getting this message out is really important because the reality is like, Christ talks about the narrow path.
Mm-hmm.
And the narrow path, there's not a lot of people on it. So in some ways, it's easier to stay within mass consciousness because it's not lonely.
Right.
You could sit there and argue about Trump and Biden and
Mm-hmm.
all the nonsense in the world that's meant to keep us distracted because we know that's not the end game. These people aren't making the decisions. But we can
Right.
get caught up in the Netflix series and talk about, these things
Mm-hmm.
that we just consume.
Right.
And there's a few people that are like, I think I see beyond the veil. I'm starting to see beyond the veil.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to see beyond the agenda. And when I talk to people about it, they think I'm crazy. Okay, so I'm going to shut up.
Right.
No, don't
To
shut
be
up.
normal, I'm going to shut up to be accepted. And
Yeah,
I mean, it's like you kind of feel like you gotta dumb yourself down
right.
to someone else's frequency to kind of like fit in with them. And I mean, and that's, there's a time and a place, but you need to, I feel like it's important to have people in your life that are on the same page of just of what's really happening.
I agree.
Yeah. And it's hard to find these days. So that's kind of why I was like, I wanted to start this and just, hopefully
Whoever's going to need to hear it's going to find it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a portal,
Right.
and like I said, there's so much information out there with different frequencies and different messages, and this is
Mm-hmm.
one of them that I
Yeah.
believe to be a higher frequency. So it's going to be a warm feeling. Like what I usually say when I do a podcast at the beginning is don't listen to a word I say.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't resonate with your body, then don't believe it. And that
Right.
goes for anything.
Right.
So if someone's here and they're still listening to this, that means that they're in agreement. Their body is in agreement
Mm-hmm.
with what we're saying, with the
Right.
frequency, with the transmission.
Right.
Because as you climb the ladder of consciousness, you realize is most things will not pass the sniff test.
Mm-hmm.
I can barely consume anything. I haven't watched. People ask me, "Have you seen Game of Thrones? Have you seen this?" Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't watch most films.
Mm-hmm.
I'll watch some YouTube videos, but I watch very carefully on the person speaking.
Right.
Because even if the message is of light, the transmission's not of light.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll have to shut it off.
Yeah.
I threw out most of the books in my house. I threw out tarot cards.
Mm-hmm.
You start being very sensitive
Mm-hmm.
to the energies, not of just people, but of anything that's being transmitted to you. Right? I can't go into a bar like I used to, or
Yeah.
a nightclub, or
Yeah.
I almost had a panic attack last time I went to Vegas.
Oh, well, that will do it. I actually
Yeah.
did have one of my worst panic attacks in Vegas the second time that I went there to celebrate my 25th birthday. Something about, I guess it's just something in the air in Vegas. It's very sinister.
Yeah.
It's a lot of energy. Um, so Vegas is definitely a place that is not the place to go when you're on your healing
Right.
journey. I mean, I lived in Vegas for a year, but it's funny. When I was living there, I wasn't really in the party scene in Vegas. I was doing house things with my friends. So it was a lot better. But in general, it's funny you say that, how you feel like you can't even step into a bar. I'm going to do an episode soon with one of my friends who she was sober for the past like 8 months, and just how it shifted her life, because she was, we would always hang out and drink together. It was just a normal thing that we would do, drink and hang out and talk. It was just a part of socializing. And it helped her life so much as she's like cut off alcohol from her life. And I was telling one of my friends, I'm like, I feel like every time I'm like on a journey to self discovery and just on this path of doing the right thing, for some reason, drinking doesn't hit me the same way, and alcohol doesn't affect me the same way in some reason. My like body and soul is literally rejecting it. Like I don't even feel a buzz. I don't feel enjoyment out of it. It's just, and I could try to compartmentalize and say, okay, like 5 days, 6 days of the week, I'm doing my best, and then I can have a day that I'm just out and we'll have a few drinks, and I just won't even enjoy it. It's like I'm literally like my spirit rejects it, and that's interesting because it does say that, like, like wine and spirit, like it's a spirit,
Right.
Alcohol, and it welcomes spirits into your life, negative spirits. So
The original definition, I believe, is flesh-eating spirit. Yeah, I don't know if it's Aramaic. I forget the original translation. It's not Greek. I think it's Aramaic. Flesh-eating spirit.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
It's I what I've learned now is that some of these things like alcohol. I mean, I don't think complete abstinence is always the answer,
Right.
but I do believe like these pleasures in life need to be managed.
Yeah.
And held with reverence. So now I'll drink alcohol. I haven't in a while, but like if someone's celebrating
right
a new podcast or it's someone's, I don't know, just something. I thought about taking my father out because my mother got sick and he's been taking care of her, and I haven't had a drink in 6 months. So like as a way of saying thank you,
right,
having a drink with my dad, right? Because it's ceremonial. And if we could do things with more intention and with more of that ceremonial purpose,
right,
life becomes more fulfilling. Those
right.
pleasures become much more interesting.
Right, I agree, and I tend to be extreme with things sometimes, but I think it's now I'm about finding my balance. I'm not going to be from one day to the other. Like I don't drink alcohol at all, and I'm just like this sober person that just never has fun. When I was the complete opposite, like a few months ago. Like I'm about finding the balance. So even like I went to a whiskey tasting a few weeks ago, and it was just so knowledgeable, and it was a great experience. The woman just knew exactly how to like teach you about the notes and about the pairings, and it was a great time. And I feel like I actually got to taste the whiskey and enjoy it, and not drink it to get drunk or not drink it to feel good. And I didn't have an urge to go continue drinking like I probably would have and make it a night out. It was just kind of like, oh, I actually just enjoyed this experience, and I learned about whiskey and I learned about pairing, and it was good to have that limitation of I didn't start drinking to just make it a night. Like I could just enjoy just the fun aspect, the socializing aspect of it.
Yes.
So I think that's just little things is just good to find your balance, because it's all about just finding a balance.
I think so. I mean, I think that we are, divine and human.
Yeah.
And, being able to find that balance between our humanness and our divinity is really important. And if we ignore one of those aspects or we abuse one of those aspects, then, we'll probably get into trouble. I have the ability to go into isolation with my spirituality, right? And maybe for very few people that's a path, like a monk, but I'm not a monk, So I could find myself for months and months being in nature by myself. And then I realize that now my spiritual practice is out of balance.
Right.
Because everything is spiritual, and my interactions and my connections and my relationships is where I'm actually going to practice that spirituality.
Right.
I'll go mad
Mm-hmm.
if I just stay in the woods and just try to commune with God every day, all day.
Right.
So I think, I do think harmony and balance is what we learn from nature. And I think the word nature is really interesting because it's a homonym. It's our human nature and the nature that we witness and experience outside of us. It's the same thing.
Right.
So the lessons are all around us. But I agree with you. I think balance, no one would ever argue and say, oh, it's true. That's a stupid idea, balance.
Mm-hmm.
No one would ever say, because it sounds like a fundamental truth to me. Right.
And I feel like it's just about being authentic. Like you don't want to, you don't also want to have these like ups, highs and lows where it's like you try to do something so strict by the books and then it's like you rebel and then so it's just about finding like that sweet like median.
And that's what I'm working on, because it's easy to get rigid.
Yeah.
Right. Especially when you walk in the spiritual path, because you start getting obsessed with this like idea of morality.
Yeah.
And morality is not so black and white, right? It's like we have to find for ourselves our path,
right.
the balance within it,
yeah.
allow ourselves to be human,
mm-hmm.
to have fun, to experience different things so that we can learn and gather data.
Yeah.
But at the same time, don't get lost within it.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's basically about just being authentic.
Yeah.
In whatever you do, not doing it to just be an extremist on either end.
Right.
It's like, and a lot of times these vices are just really to mask something else. So partying or going out and drinking and stuff like that is just really to mask something else that
Sure.
you're putting off and avoiding. But then sometimes overly, it could be the opposite, like overly, becoming super religious, that it's like cult-like, that's also a way that some people are masking something as well. So I think it's just like a never-ending journey, just trying to find your most authentic self and what works for you, because only you know what's going to work for you.
I agree.
No one has the same path.
No one has the same path.
Yeah.
That's the absolute truth. And however, I think authenticity is a really important word, because I know what it's like to wear a mask,
Mm-hmm.
And when you live behind an image and you pretend to be someone you're not, and to seek validation from everything and everyone, it's not real. But to be able to sit with yourself and say, I love myself. This is who I am. I'm unique.
Right.
I'm different.
Yeah.
I'm a child of God. We all are.
Mm-hmm.
And not get caught up in what other people are doing. Because
Yeah.
I think it's really easy to do that, to be like, what's wrong with those people? And what's going on with this? And it's like, that's their path.
Right.
Maybe their soul chose that path.
Right.
Maybe that's going to be us in another lifetime.
Right. Yeah.
So can I accept the chaos around me, the world around me, the changes around me, and still be centered
right.
within myself?
Right. People take different paths to get to their ultimate self. So like you said, we can't judge somebody from the outside because they might be in their worst, the worst level of their path. They might be on a level 0 or a level 10, and they have to go through all these trials and all this chaos to get to their ultimate self. So we're not the ones that's supposed to be judging, because we've all been in areas of our life where people could have looked back and be like, wow, they really don't got their shit together.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I see these people on YouTube that go to like college campuses and try to convince transgenders that they're wrong or whatever. And I'm like, has that ever worked? Is that ever going to work?
Right.
No. I mean, it's love, it's acceptance,
mm-hmm.
it's, maybe not understanding, because not everyone's going to understand
mm-hmm.
it, but who cares?
Right.
At the end of the day, who cares? Like, the only person that we can change is ourselves. We have to become the change.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have to dive into our inner worlds to find that authenticity,
right.
to find our heart, to find our souls, to find perhaps why we're here.
Yeah, and the more that somebody's telling you you're wrong, it's not going to
love.
help them. It's not love. It's not going to heal them. So it's like, I think that's a good point, because people's approach could be a little bit more sensitive, and maybe if they had a more sensitive approach to things, people would see that what they were doing was, not in their own best interest. So, and that could be with anything, that could be if somebody's just going down the wrong path of drugs, of, whatever. And you're telling them you're wrong, instead of saying like, what's real, like, are you okay? Like, how can I help you?
Right.
Or being compassionate of how they got there. There just needs to be more compassion today.
That's it. There's this idea that, like, I've heard people say, oh, you're a healer, right? Because I do certain body work and stuff. And I don't like that term, because I think we all have healing capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is, even if I help somebody, I'm just guiding them to go back into themselves to heal themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But I've signed up for so many workshops to learn techniques,
Mm-hmm.
and every one I've canceled. I've lost thousands of
Really?
dollars because God always tells me there's nothing to learn. It's
Mm-hmm.
love. If your heart is open, your hands are open.
Mm-hmm.
Your hands and your heart are connected. That's why people's hands are on fire when their hearts are open and they touch you. So as long as you keep that channel open
Mm-hmm.
between, your crown chakra, God, and your heart as a vector, then the energy will run through, and the surroundings that you create, and the settings that you create, the space that you create is the healing.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody with an open heart can do that. There's a lot of people that have learned technique,
Mm-hmm.
but they haven't healed themselves, or their heart isn't
Right.
open.
Yeah.
They could actually do a lot of damage. That's why I don't let any Reiki practitioners, anybody
Yeah.
touch me. Very
Yeah.
rarely.
You got to be very careful with that, because that's why I haven't done Reiki in a while either, because you don't know what that person they're holding within them, and the
Sure.
energy that they're transferring to you. So you could be hoping to get good energy out of it, but you're getting all their bad energy on you after the
Yes.
Reiki healing.
Yes.
So that's another thing you got to be, and also people in those. Well, I'm sure like you got to really meditate all of, like, to not absorb people's negative energy and pass it on to you and pass it on to the next person. So it's difficult. That's why I feel like you just have to pray for your own discernment and own path that will work for you. Because I feel like a lot of us are just so desperate for the truth and to find something that we'll go like in any direction that we feel like is there. We don't know. Sometimes it could be just led by the wrong thing. It could be like it could disguise itself as a positive thing, but it's really put in our place as a negative. There's just so much trials and tribulations you have to go through to really get to that ultimate place. But I guess that's just life. That's just
It's
part.
life. We all start off as like a bumblebee, like just collecting as much spiritual data that we could get.
Yeah.
I was like that, and then you get to this point of discernment
Mm-hmm.
where you're like, so does it feel right?
Yeah.
Because your body's sort of upgrading its frequency, so you can pick up on things that aren't true or don't feel good.
Yeah.
But we do tend to start with, I want to get better,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll try anything, and I'll listen to anybody,
Mm-hmm.
and that's, I think, part of the process. But I agree with you. I think the discernment is a word that we need to use always,
Mm-hmm.
not just with like, who am I listening to out in the spiritual community, but who am I letting in my bed? Who am I letting in my house? Who am I letting into my life?
Yeah.
Because people will disrupt,
Right.
and if they're not tapped into true light, they could bring a lot of people down with them. I tell you, I got so many guy friends that have dated with women that were negative,
Mm.
and some of these women, and guys do it too, because I work with
Oh
women in
yeah.
body work.
Yeah.
They use sex magic, and
Mm-hmm.
it's powerful, and they don't know they're using it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's from the animalistic primal ordinances that our men are susceptible to, and women could be susceptible to,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard to get over that, because they're, even if they're in the ethers, they're doing the work, and they're
Mm-hmm.
keeping them like a rubber band
Yeah.
from moving on.
Right. It's like a spell.
Yes.
And then it's the ultimate energy exchange.
Yes.
So it's like it's so powerful, and people don't realize that. And I think that's kind of where I'm at too, just trying to find boundaries with people, friends, like just people in general that come into my life, and just trying to, because I mean, on one end of it, like it's really important, like we said, to have compassion and just have that empathy. But I feel like I tend to be overly empathetic and overly understanding sometimes, and then don't have the boundary of like knowing when to say this is not my project to heal. Like I try to just think I can heal everybody. Everybody has like this light to them, and then it's hard. And then when I get the lesson, it's like I subconsciously know that this is a lesson in the back of my mind, but I'm like, no, no, no. Like, they have good to them, or they're, and then I realize, and it could be with male, females, with friends, and then I realize when it's completely, everything is just like up in flames and a disaster. And then I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't, that wasn't my thing to heal. Maybe I should have just left that for God, or just, I need to know when to disconnect. So I feel like boundaries are so important. That's like where I'm at right now, trying to find the perfect boundaries.
Yeah, that's like a topic that's coming up left, right, and center, like
Yeah.
especially in men's work. Boundaries is, at the end of the day, like sometimes it's disguised as why it's easier to help somebody else with their problems than to help myself with my own problems.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I'm gonna just have a hotline where anybody could call me, and I'm gonna
Right. I'm just going to be a healer, but I haven't even
yeah,
healed myself.
yeah. It's a lot easier to do it that way because
Hmm.
men my father worked in prisons in Rikers Island,
Oh, wow.
and the most in any prison in the world, the worst punishment you could give somebody is solitary confinement,
Yeah.
right? Why? Because these men don't want to sit with their own pain.
Mm.
They'd rather go out into the yard and risk getting shanked by their enemy, right?
Right.
Some other crazy prisoner.
Right.
But to sit in a hole for 5 hours with their own thoughts, with their own emotions, with the things that probably caused them to go into jail,
Hmm.
they will not do.
It's more hurtful. It's scarier.
Scarier.
Yeah.
So this is like kind of human nature is like, I don't want, this was me for many years. I'd see that memory, that event, that betrayal,
Hmm.
and I'd look at it like this, and then look away.
Hmm.
Figuratively speaking,
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I'd glance at it.
Yeah.
What healing is staring at it.
Hmm.
It's like looking the dragon in the
In the
eyes
eye.
until he gets out of the way so that you can walk the path.
Hmm.
But it's painful to stare at the dragon in the eyes because
Right.
that means remembering and potentially reliving that event temporarily
Hmm.
to heal it.
Right.
Because the only way out is through.
Through.
So yeah, I'll talk to my friends. Oh yeah, you broke up with your girlfriend. Okay, let's talk about it.
Right. It's easy to talk about your stuff.
Yeah, it's easy to talk about
It's
your
distracting
stuff.
me doing my healing.
Right.
That's kind of what a lot of people do too. And I feel like that for me, I'm like, okay, if I can't heal myself, let me go heal everybody else.
Yeah.
It's gonna make me feel so much better.
Yeah.
And then those people end up just taking and taking and taking, and then it's just like, and then things blow up, and it's like, oh wow, I shouldn't have even. Some things you just got to leave up to God. You can't be the healer of everybody and the healer of everything, and just you have to learn how to separate that.
Because your space is sacred.
Yeah.
Your time is sacred. Your self healing is sacred. And at the same time, like if you're one of those people that's listening, that's a sign that maybe your path is to serve and help other people because empathy is a beautiful gift.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have sympathy, but not a lot of people have empathy. Like, for example, like everybody loves their own children. It's not a hard thing to do. But loving all children, feeling for like the children in Gaza, that's true empathy. That's angelic empathy.
Right.
And if you feel like you want to help everybody, then that's a sign that you're here to serve God in a really big way. And if we get ourselves right first, then we could actually apply that empathy in a healthy way. Because what I've noticed is like a lot of these healers, they can't step away from other people's pain. That's why it gets stuck on them.
Yeah.
But like a true king, let's say there's a king and he's looking down at his kingdom and his kingdom's on fire. He's not going to drop to his knees and cry. He's going to look at it go on fire. He's going to feel it, but then he's going to do something about it. He's not going to get emotionally attached to the event. And right now I have friends that are like Palestinian and they can't get out of bed. I understand it.
Yeah.
But those people are also, some of them are incredibly gifted healers. Their power is at like 10%.
Yeah.
Their capacity is 100%.
Yeah.
And it's at 10% because they're still stuck in sympathy. They feel the same pain that all those children are feeling.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful, but at the same time, it's disempowered.
Yeah. It takes away from your power.
Yeah, because how are you gonna step into a place of change if you are resonating on that level?
Yeah.
There's no power.
Yeah, and it's really hard to find. I think that's one of the hardest things to do is you have so much empathy for people that it's hard to, because it's a physical sensation. It's like physical, mentally, spiritually. You're so like you're literally feeling the pain, like you said.
Yeah.
Feeling the pain and the suffering, and you're seeing parents cry, and you're imagining what it's like to lose a child. You're actually putting yourself into their trauma and their pain, and it's really hard to step away and just like turn a blind eye. And then another part of you is like, should I not watch these things? Should I not have like that empathy that I do? And then it's just like you don't want to become insensitive either. So
No,
it's so hard to
the
find
empathy
that
is
balance.
necessary to be in service,
Hmm.
but like, can you feel it and then use it as fuel?
Yeah.
Feel it, use it as fuel. Almost like, people look at anger in men as a bad thing.
Hmm.
It's not a bad thing, because anger is necessary. Righteous anger is necessary for
Hmm.
someone to step into a platform of change.
Right.
So I could feel it. I could get aggravated. There's people trafficking children.
Hmm.
I feel that anger, and then I go build something.
Right.
I build
Because
a
it's
chair.
passion. It's
It's
passion
passion.
for what you believe in and
Yeah.
what you think is right and what you
Yeah.
think is wrong. And I feel like a lot of people lack that passion. So I think passion is a beautiful thing. I think.
Passion is everything. Passion of the Christ. That
Hmm.
was his whole process,
Yeah.
serving God,
Yeah.
right? We need that.
Yeah. We need more of that. So do you feel like when the men you work with, how many men do you normally work with? Is it just kind of people that you know will come to you, or like how do they find you?
Well, it's usually through referrals,
Hmm.
So I'll start. The group that I run now is 10 guys,
Okay.
and then we slowly add to the container.
Okay.
But we kind of take it as a vote, because we don't want to get too big.
Yeah.
But I'm designing a new format, because now I'm more interested in building movements and
Hmm.
systems
Hmm.
versus groups.
Okay.
So how do I turn this into an incubator
Hmm.
where actually we could activate thousands of men instead of dozens of men?
Bigger scale, basically.
Yeah, almost run it like a business. Like, you
Oh.
have layers,
Okay.
right? And you
Yeah.
move through a qualification process, and there's a core that keeps the whole thing together.
Okay.
But guys that are new to men's work could start at the bottom, and maybe there's 8 to 10 groups, and
Hmm.
each of those groups has 8 to 10 guys.
Hmm.
They learn about men's work, they heal themselves, and then they become qualified, and they can step into service because they're not getting in their own way.
Hmm.
So I'm designing that now.
Like a fraternity type of thing, but for grown men that are seeking healing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's a brotherhood.
it's a brotherhood.
Yeah, and that's really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
So, and I feel like it's great because where do men go these days when they're adults and they're in the real world and they want healing? Like, there's not a lot of places for them to.
There's a lot of escapism for men.
Mm-hmm.
We could gamble, we could date, we could go to pornography, but there's not a lot of places where that prevent escapism, that actually are more confrontational in a healthy way.
Right, right. So I think that's so important because for some reason, like I said, like women, we have it a lot easier with that. We have a lot better chances of finding a community, and being able to be vulnerable. But the work you're doing, I think, is great because a lot of men can use that at any age. It doesn't matter your path in life. Like if you're just starting up, if you're still in school, if you're married with kids, like someone can go there anytime and just decide to work on themselves. And
Absolutely. And then, like you said, women are usually have more groups and sisterhoods. But like, imagine having what I just described with men with women.
right.
And then at some point we come together a couple times a year.
Yeah.
And we now are creating a real community, that people that are already conscious coming together, want to live together, want to create together.
Right. It would be a great place for people to meet people.
Absolutely.
It's becoming with healed people already. Like it's people that are at least working on their healing instead of just going out to a club and trying to find somebody.
That's it. I mean, the best thing that we could do, right? Because I know we're impatient. We come into this world, we see a problem, we want it to solve right away.
Yeah.
Real change, could take, from God's view, could take thousands of years. True evolution, right? The humanity's only been around for 40,000 years. So we see this change. We want it to happen in a couple of decades.
Mm-hmm.
The best thing that I believe we could do in this lifetime is mate properly.
Mm-hmm.
Just find the right man, find the right woman, have a child with that person that's qualified, conscious, elevated, raise elevated children, and now you create this new paradigm shift.
Right.
So I could sit here and be like, I'm almost 50. I have maybe 30, 40 years on this lifetime. I can only do so much, but I could set the wheels in motion. Mm-hmm. And if I brought a couple of conscious kids into this world and raised them the right way and die, that's my legacy.
Right.
Because that kid could be the next, I don't know, civil rights leader,
right,
spiritual leader, right?
And I think that's the ultimate goal because it's really like how we're going to leave our legacy. And by doing work like that, like you're breaking those generational curses, and you're making sure that your future generation doesn't have to go through the same struggles, or they're coming in with two healed parents already, so that's already, they're at an advantage, and imagine how the world would be if everybody was coming into the world like this.
Yeah.
It would be like such a beautiful thing. So yeah, I think that's a great idea to start that community, and just, it's like expanding the consciousness through community, and then it multiplies from there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is. You just kind of get out of the way, bring those people together, and then it becomes like a think tank.
Yeah.
It's not about, having the right leader or this. It's just creating the container.
Mm-hmm.
Everything happens. It's like if you threw a party and you invited 100 amazing people, it's not necessarily about you.
Yeah.
You've already done the work by bringing those people together as a
Mm-hmm.
connector. It's not what you say that night. It's not what you wear that night.
Right.
It's like you already did the magic.
Yeah. Yeah. You brought together the right people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the right theme, which is always God, in my view, because anything absent of God is going to crumble at some
Mm-hmm.
point. So if you have a relationship and God is not at the center, it's going to crumble.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, you're reliant on your own conscience, you're relying on your own morality, you're relying on your own spirituality.
Right.
But what do they say? Couples that pray together stay together. I believe that.
Yeah.
I believe it, because the most masculine thing a guy could do is have a relationship with God. If my wife sees me praying in the morning, asking for forgiveness, asking for strength, she's going to feel safe, no?
Right.
I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Right. So now when I go out with my friends, she's like, my husband prays to God every day. He gives grace before we eat. He's a good man.
Mm-hmm.
I know he's human, but I don't have to worry about him the way I did about my ex-boyfriends, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this brings in a whole different element to our humanity.
Right.
So when we build community around that, we know that it's good. We know that it's pure. We know that there's a momentum behind it.
Right. There's a driving force.
There's a driving force. And when the Bible even says, when two or more gather, I appear.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen like crazy stuff I can't even talk about that some people would call miracles.
Yeah.
When 3 or 4 men in a men's group that truly have God in their heart get together,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen miraculous things happen, because that's when you start seeing forests light on fire,
Right.
clouds move in really strange ways.
Yeah.
Portals open. I've even seen where it looks like there's a spirit just bouncing around. Like, it's insane.
Wow. It's the power of community.
But not when you're by yourself. Usually
Yeah.
when there's the community together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
It's really
so
fast.
much forces joined together.
Yes.
That
It's
is-
like, imagine like if we all put our intention on one prayer. They've done this in the world where like everybody's praying for the same thing.
Mhm.
And that manifestation that happens through that energy that moves is huge.
Yeah.
Because intention is everything.
Right. So it's all these intentions focused on the same thing. Something's bound to be moved.
Absolutely. We're a symphony, right? We're all playing our own instrument, but the question is, how well are we playing it?
Right.
We create an angelic symphony, a harmony together.
Mhm.
If we're all running around chasing our tails,
Yeah.
and we influence each other, let's be honest.
Right.
Like if you that's why your parents when you were young were like, stay away from that girl, she's a bad influence.
Mhm.
Of course, because if we're in the light, our light's going to be contagious, and if we're in the dark, our dark's going to be contagious.
Yeah.
So when you create this safe container where everybody is resonating with this higher frequency,
Mhm.
everybody, it's like a spiral.
Yeah. Because it becomes the norm. Whatever you're used to, it becomes whatever you surround yourself with. You could be the most healed person, but if you're always surrounding yourself with a certain type of low frequency behavior or thought pattern, you're gonna pick up on those.
Mhm.
Like it's inevitable. So that's why it's important to, like I said, have the boundaries and also know when to step in and when to know you've done your part. And like we said, discernment is important. So,
Yes.
yeah. So we're really like almost an hour and a half in already.
Wow. This might be a 3-part episode.
I know. We could talk forever.
Yes.
But do you have, so if any men are interested in joining, what would be their first steps if they're interested in joining with you? And
Oh yeah, they can reach out to me on Instagram.
Okay.
You can probably drop my tag in the episode. I'm in the process of designing this new thing, so that's going to launch next year, and that's going to be, like I said, an incubator for men that not only want to heal, but want to be in service, that want to do something meaningful in their life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Enjoy the work you're doing. I think it's so
Oh, thank
important.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I think that, a lot of men will benefit from this, and I feel like it's gonna, like you said, it's gonna help the next generation. So that's all we can
Yes,
do is hope that whatever we're doing and whatever healing we're doing is gonna be passed down eventually to the next generation.
absolutely. You know, it's just, it's, we all need each other.
Yeah.
We can't do it by ourselves. I tried.
Yeah.
I tried. And what
Yeah.
happens is you hit a dead end
Mm-hmm.
because we need those reflections and we need that brotherhood and we need to feel touch,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I've never been, my father, I don't think ever hugged me. So and they all hugged me at the same time. It was like nothing I've ever experienced before.
Was it uncomfortable?
No, I think my body was thirsty for it. So it wasn't uncomfortable. It was actually very comforting
Mm-hmm.
for me.
Yeah. You're ready to receive.
I was ready to receive. So, like, you know, how many men are just yearning
Yeah.
for affection and to be seen and to be heard and to be held
Right.
by powerful dudes? You know, like I have a lot of women that are like, where are the conscious men? I'm like, they're out there, they're doing the work.
Yeah.
You know, so yes, it's good work. It's important work. Anyone that's interested could reach out. And this is how we start. Another commercial.
Yeah.
We're getting
Should have
sponsored.
done.
There's a lot of sponsors.
I know, right? I feel like we should be getting like paid for this. Yeah, thank you so much for doing my first episode with me. And if you guys want to reach out to Robert and any men out there want to see what his work is about, it's really great and it's truly beneficial. So if any of you are looking for a sense of community and need that strong sense of masculinity and just guidance in your life, I definitely recommend reaching out to Robert. And I'll link his Instagram and his, I don't know if you have a website, but
I do.
yeah, I'll link all of his social media. So
thank you. It was an honor to be your first guest.
Of
I'm
course.
flattered. I hope I did not disappoint.
You did amazing. I think they're really going to enjoy it. But
Thank you.
yeah, guys, stay tuned because I'm sure me and Robert will have a lot more topics to discuss eventually.
Yeah, we could go for hours.
Yeah, we could definitely talk for hours. But thank you guys for joining us on this episode. I hope you enjoyed.